Welcome back. Kill the Cat Radio, KTCR. Another episode of Two Mics, Season 2, Episode 2. I got the pleasure of having a returning guest. His name's Christopher North. He's a composer, a conductor, a multi-instrumentalist, a professor, and a really great friend. He came over here to the Villa Borghese Studios in Brooklyn, New York, to sit down with me and discuss what's going on in his life, his new challenges, his successes and philosophies. It's great to have him back. Fantastic guy as always. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, subscribe below. Here is the sit-down interview with Christopher North.
This is the ACMA Orchestra, the American Classical Musicians Association. A good friend, Neil Proofer, is the head of that organization, and this is essentially talented amateur musicians that play really well. And this was a 24-piece ensemble. Amazing. That was the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, and it was a beautiful piece that helped.
It was awesome.
Bring clarinet into symphonies. So we have that piece to thank for that, which is kind of an amazing thing. And then there was my piece, On the Verge of, which had the same resources as Mozart's Clarinet Concerto, plus a trumpet and an additional horn. The subtitle for that is a fantasia, and a fantasia basically means that it's kind of at the composer's whimsy, at the whim of the composer. So it allows you to do a whole bunch of things. You would be implied that from the title that's more improv, which there can be improvisation in a composer's process, but ultimately you're putting notes on paper. And there was something about this notion of amateur music making that was kind of always at the center of some of it, of just like, what does it mean for people that are playing really well, but also don't necessarily have the background of doing this kind of thing all the time. So there's a lot of these musicians that had not played a new piece like this before ever. To see their reaction every week when I was giving them new notes.
Right, new notes, yeah.
And the knowing that we're going to arrive at the final notes, that's kind of its own thing. As a film composer, I certainly know about that. But for them, it was really, really exciting, even though there was kind of some unknowns about it. So this idea of like a living composer. Sometimes as a conductor, a lot of times there's this idea of let's get a perfect performance and not make mistakes.
Right.
And oftentimes to kind of relax things a little bit, I'll just say, I will really celebrate a first mistake. To say like, you know what, okay, fine, it's not going to be perfect. Let's enjoy this now. Let's have some fun. This notion of on the verge of and the different meanings of that really came to the foreground. And that's like on the verge of making a mistake, on the verge of a different chapter of your life, on the verge of getting better, taking better care of yourself. I have not done a concerti at that point. Now I've done several, because I've also done a Mozart piano concerto and going to be doing a bass concerto next year. So there's that's now, a lot of people might not know what a concerto is. Perhaps our audience, no offense, guys, but like you guys might not even know what a concerto is. I don't think I know what it is. Can you explain that? Yeah, sure. It's essentially, earlier on, it would have been a piece where you would have a soloist, and that the orchestra would play as accompaniment for that. But you're essentially having a solo instrument in the foreground of most of the musical textures. Later, as that kind of happened and developed, sometimes that soloist versus the accompaniment would be more adversarial, which is to say the soloist is kind of doing one thing and supported by the orchestra, but then there's other times where it's more something in the orchestra versus something in the soloist part. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of my favorite pieces, like Bartók's Concerto for Orchestra, which is where Vita's different sections are fighting each other. And
that would be a concerto, so each part of it, so instead of having a soloist and the orchestra accompanying the soloist, it would have different aspects of the
orchestra
kind of fighting, vying for attention in this kind of huge piece, and that would be what a concerto would be.
So, but I guess I'm kind of leaning into the adversarial part of it because it's just interesting. But really, it's one other way to kind of think about it is, a song for an instrument that gets to not only sing the song, but also do all their cool chops and lean into the special stuff that instrument does. So with the clarinet concerto last year, that piece basically meant that Mozart showed so much amazing stuff that the clarinet can do,
that the orchestra, eventually people started adopting the clarinet into the orchestra. And that's, so there's a through line from that all the way to like Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue. Like those,
So Mozart incorporated. So before Mozart,
yeah, there's nothing. There's like basset horns and some other stuff like that.
Bassoons, right?
Yeah, but that's also single reed versus double reed and stuff like that. So that's the other part of the way that works. But yeah, the clarinet concerto basically meant that from here on out we're going to start having clarinet in orchestra. So
what year is this about?
That's 17. That would have been 1750s, 60s, I think.
There's some gaps in my education here.
60s probably. Well, I probably won't do Mozart next year, if there is a next year. But hopefully there will be next year. But we won't. But it is. I think the orchestra is still growing, and so we had a bigger concert this spring, where we did about an hour and 25 minutes worth of music, which is like the most music that I've ever conducted.
Where was this done?
This was at a church in the West Village, in the West 20s.
Right.
That was Mendelssohn, Midsummer Night's Dream, Overture, and the Nocturne, and then Haydn Symphony number 99. We also did On the Verge of there, so that was another repeat performance of that. For the smaller stage at Carnegie, it's really a chamber orchestra sound, and yet we first of all, just to rent timpani in New York City is another whole thing.
Oh wow!
Will forever be indebted. Yeah, because it's not like, I mean, the rock band, you have the drummer brings the drums, right?
Of course, right.
That's not the way it goes with kettle drums for a timpanist.
Where do you even rent those things? I mean, obviously music houses, right?
Yeah. So SIR, they rented them from SIR.
Oh yeah. These I know guys who work
these
for
giant boxes for them. And this is like a rainy day. I'm talking about something in April, and I'll forever be indebted to Neil for handling all that, because Neil handed the.
Who's Neil? Yeah.
Neil is the director.
Oh, right. ECMO. I think I met him when I went. Yeah.
He's a ear, nose, throat doctor, and so also piano player too, and he's a pianist, and he's playing some stuff. I think
so. A lot of these people involved with you in your musical projects that you're doing through Carnegie Hall and on your own, and in some of these churches and such, they're kind of repeat players. Like they're repeat players. They come back again to work with you, but they also have a life outside of this,
right?
And that is something like when you say amateur, I think immediately like, that they're not educated or whatever, or they're just kind of doing it for fun. But all these people that you're working with, when you say amateur, you don't mean amateur in the sense of
no, they're just
that.
It's just they're people that have played. Some of them are professionals as well,
right?
But it's not a professional.
What would be the difference between amateur and professional? Whether you get paid or not.
How much you get paid.
God, I've been an amateur all my life.
And what is your focus? In terms of what kinds of performances and ticketing, and there's a different kind of passion that happens with quote unquote amateur performances sometimes than
more
than
the professionals.
It can be. It depends on what orchestra you're talking about. But if you're sitting on the front row for, I'm not going to name any names, but for certain orchestras, you're not going to see as much excitement and enthusiasm.
Really? Cut me a check.
Yeah, but it depends on how many
they're
years.
less excited.
I do think there's certain malaise that
can happen in the professional world there. Okay, well, that's a bummer.
Yeah, but you're also talking about people at a super hyper level. So in other words, how they look.
They don't sound very fun.
How they look on their faces might be a different situation than the music that you're actually hearing. So there can be people that sound incredible, but then you look at their faces, and that's the way that's.
I'm going to stick with the amateurs. I think
that's kind of my point. Is that you're going to see a different level of visible engagement. Whether that's in the faces, in the playing, or whatever. And even if some things are a little not scrappy, but a little more on the edge or on the verge of, then that's even what the piece was. Is like it literally. I wrote that piece right on the edge of what I thought they could do, because it had some multimeter things in there that I knew would be challenging for them.
Because you knew each of their talent levels,
right? And this is kind of one of the really cool things that happens with composers and arrangers over time. The story goes that Ellington typically would not write the names of the parts; he'd write the names of the players. So he's sitting there, he's knowing he's got an alto sax person, or maybe he's even got like a whole flute section, and he's going to write their names because he can actually hear their sound. And that was literally what started happening to me in this piece. Is like I could hear how Marvin was going to play this one flute part.
Sure,
I could hear how
you knew these people.
I knew what they could. Yeah. and I knew what I could count on them to do, and yet the piece was written from some aspects of the piece right on the edge of what they could do on the verge.
Yeah, of course.
Knowing that this could fall apart. This could completely fall apart. And,
but I mean, enough practice, they know what they're doing.
Right.
I mean, how long do you have to practice for like an event like a Carnegie?
I think we had 10 Sundays. 10.
Oh wow, that's
10 rehearsals. There would have been a sectional. There would have been a get together with the clarinetist, and then also get together with the concert mistress Clarice, and then some other stuff. But basically, you're talking about, I think it was some 9 or 10 rehearsals. Some of this kind of cross connects to an interesting other New York story, which is to say, I did some ringer playing, which is where I got called. Excuse me, to play with a very talented New York City youth orchestra. So here I am, this old guy playing bass, and I get called to play with this youth orchestra, and I get called to do a gig out on Long Island. This
is when you first moved here?
Yeah, this would have been summer of 2000. So this will set up me playing my first show at Lion King. So I'm playing with this youth orchestra. I get called out for this gig. They have this special gig out in Long Island, and Quincy Jones is conducting, and I need Tom Barney. Tom Barney is the bass player for Lion King. He's also played with Steely Dan and Michael Jackson, and I show up. I happen to come from somewhere else, so I have an electric bass on my back, an acoustic bass on my front. I'm playing in the orchestra. He shows up. He's got an electric bass on his back, acoustic bass on his front. He's playing electric bass, though. Whoa. So there's a little bit of an immediate, hey, you're here, I'm here. Hey, do you want to come watch Lion King? Because that's what the culture calls for. That's cool. So not even a month later, this is August of 2001.
Yeah.
I go watch Lion King. I study, practice my tail off, say, hey, I'm ready to play my first show, I think 3rd week of 2001.
Wow.
9/11 happens.
Uh-oh.
All the other gigs that all these other musicians had shut down.
Oh no.
And so he played. I did not play Lion King again until 2002. January, and then I played it for like 10 years, and eventually.
That's crazy to think about. You're in the pit for 10 years playing Lion King on Broadway.
Right. So that's why.
How's that for a resume?
Right. And so by about year 4 or 5 or so, I'm watching the guitar book. It's right next to me. Kevin Kuhn is the guitar player. It's that chair has electric guitar, classical guitar, ukulele, and then 3 different tunings of thumb piano. And I study up on that part, and I start subbing on that part as well. So on Lion King, I played in the bass chair, which is acoustic and electric. It's got the Hans Zimmer score stuff. It's got Elton John songs. It's got the African stuff.
And you're doing all that.
You're doing all that.
Oh wow, that's fun.
And then on the guitar book, it's got the rock stuff. It's got ukulele. It's got thumb piano. So that, and I did that till I think I played that till approximately just to the situation with seeing my kid on Saturday Night Exchange, which probably was around 2011 or so. And I also played on Rent, Lion King,
nice,
Lion King, Hair, and Spring Awakening.
Wow.
So those were all shows, and
this is how you were making a living. You were making a living in Manhattan.
1 to 8 shows a week.
Wow.
Did that for like 10 years.
I mean, do a lot of people just stay doing that? I mean, isn't that like a pretty kind of decent living, I think, right?
Yep. And I would still do some of that again. And that's another part of what my daily life right now is, as I've kind of mentioned to you in other settings and other folks in other settings. It's been awesome being a professor, and it's been awesome being a conductor, and all the steps of walking through that as a career as well as a daily practice. Some of me misses just playing more, and so that part of me that's a multi-instrumentalist, that part of me that's a professional bass player.
Because I've been to your studio, and you've got tons of instruments up there. How many different instruments do you play?
I don't know. It's like it's
over 20.
Over 20 guitars. So yeah.
Whoa! But I'm saying, like, how many different, like, okay, so you can play stringed instruments. Can you play like woodwinds?
I've got like recorder and
can you play the recorder?
I do.
I think I can play the recorder.
I mean, there's people that play really, really well. And so like melodica and harmonica and sitar,
harmonica,
and then also some different kinds of synth controllers and banjo, cello banjo. These are generally more string things, but also other kinds of other percussion. I mentioned the thumb piano earlier. I've
Right.
got a little mini marimba. I also have some new boutique instruments that are newly created. One thing called a tapping instrument called a harpeggi. That's something that, everyone from Stevie Wonder to other film composers use that. I've also got a bowed guitar, so a couple of specialty things.
What about straight up rock drums? Yeah.
Yeah, I
you keep a beat like.
Yeah. Oh no, I've played drums on a lot of my stuff. The main challenge there is just New York City apartments.
Right.
So,
yeah, there's not really a.
When one of my favorite things about my life in Dallas before moving to New York was that I had a whole room for my drum kit, and I still have the bass drum pedal.
But you can do all that. You can.
I do. Yeah. My feet still kind of suck, but it's just not doing it that much.
So when you say multi-instrumentalist, you mean it.
I have been a singer on Grammy Award winning records, and so that's like all the stuff.
I mean, this just happened.
Well, it's like a 2-year process.
You were doing, you were already you were professing there.
Got the word. I've been started off as an assistant professor in January 2019.
Yeah,
and that department, the songwriting department, but I also do some stuff related to songs for sync and music and songs for film and TV. I have done some music supervision, and I've also worked for some big music supervisors, and so and that's been another part of my expansion into film, is not only as an executive producer on films, but also as a producer on films.
Well, that's where I wanted to kind of go into too, is if you can list sort of some of the things you've worked on when it comes down to shows and show running. So we've established that you've obviously came from the ground up in the sense of working in the pits in Broadway in Manhattan and working on some pretty high-powered shows and working with some interesting people, and then moving into making your own work and composing your own work and composing with this, the Late Starter Orchestra and your own people that you've worked with. Now let's move into a little bit more of the shows that you've worked on, because you were working with me, you were working with a lot of other independent directors. What films did you work on thus far, and what was one of the first ones that kind of broke you into the film festival circuit? The
first one was really with Matthew Miele, a writer-director. We did a film called Everything's Jake, which starred Ernie Hudson, otherwise known as the Black Ghostbuster. That would have been 2004.
And the Cop and the Crow. Yeah. The original Crow.
That's true.
Yeah.
That would have been 2004 or so, maybe. Yeah. And then shortly that was followed by another film of his called Eavesdrop. And that was one that had like just a magnum opus of music in it, about 83 minutes of music. Sometimes you're going to get an opportunity that you're not going to realize how great of an opportunity it was until after the fact, when you meet other people that didn't have that. And so I'm still thankful for that first really good shot.
Well, I mean, your resume proves for itself that you had the experience and you were prepared, obviously, with the musical skills and stuff like that. So it's always a mix of luck, opportunity, right? Yeah. Be in the right place. I mean, I guess if you were in Tucson or something like that, you wouldn't have the same opportunities as you would find in Manhattan when you finally got here.
I mean, ultimately, you want distribution. So, and those both of those films I just mentioned were distributed.
Everything's Jake
and Eavesdrop. I had a film called Lucky Days with Angelica Page, previously known as Angelica Torn. It also starred her father. Rip Torn was in that film. We share the same birthday, and we're all from Texas.
Love
too. So
that
that's kind
guy.
of interesting. He is a really interesting person.
Yeah.
But anyway, that film called Lucky Days is a homage to Coney Island, and so I just was biked out to Coney Island. I think about that film all the time, but going out to Coney Island. But that one did really well and was also had a DVD release and stuff. So
so that one actually went to some major festivals?
It did.
Nice.
I mean, I think, and then I had a bunch more that have done, South by and Tribeca, and the films that have gone to South by Southwest, that includes, of course, Max Roach, which was the Max Roach documentary, which was a year and a half ago. That would have been 2022. Max Roach, the drum, also waltzes, which is my third collaboration with Sam Pollard, the multi-award-winning director and editor, also known as an editor for Spike Lee's films. And so,
I knew that name sounded really familiar.
Sam Pollard,
wow.
We also worked on Two Trains Running. These are all films that have played at, whether it's Woodstock Film Festival, which I'll go to later in next month, as well as Slam Dance, South by Southwest, Tribeca, and I've had some award-winning films at
talk about those.
several film festivals too. So I'm 2 for 2 award-winning at Slam Dance. That's for a short called Think Inc. with Wally Chung, and a feature documentary called Bible Quiz with Nicole Teeny.
Bible Quiz.
Wow. It's weird because I have on my website, I actually have like a whole listing of every
where people can find that.
At ChristopherNorth.com. But then
ChristopherNorth.com, people.
And in my About section, there's a listing of a link you can go to that has every film and every festival I've been to.
You can see his full CV,
festival thing.
The temple that is Christopher North.
One of the things I've really taken from thinking about Leonard Bernstein is this notion that it's all one thing. Yes, he would have wished he would have composed more, but at the end of the day, teaching, giving lectures at Harvard, conducting,
smart guy,
having I listen to the Harvard lectures once a year. I listen to all 6 of them. He was
kind of spazzy a little bit.
I can be spazzy.
No, but I'm saying he was like a real jokester too. You could tell that he had like a real New York kind of sense of humor and stuff to his work. I can see a parallel between you and Bernstein. Yeah, but in that sense, because of the teaching and doing his own thing. I don't see
it as a day job. I don't.
Right.
I actually see it as I'm very lucky that I get to share what I love. And the thing that baffles some other people is the fact that somehow that gives me more energy than less. And that's the thing that like.
Well, I think some people are like that, though, psychologically speaking. The more you give them, the more you push on them or give them opportunities to do things. It increases the rate of output,
right?
As opposed to people who are just honed and centered. I don't even think nowadays you can be mono interest type of person, because you have to kind of spread yourself all over the place, and if you can't work in that kind of multimedia environment, then I don't know what you're going to do.
Well, and that would be a good good segue into just talking about New York now versus New York way back versus the New York that I fell in love with, the New York that I wanted to move here with.
Oh, I'm way into that.
In the last 2 years, I would say the number of times I've gone to a film or a music event, and seen somebody that I knew lived in New York, and I have made the assumption that they still do, only to find out that they don't. You know what I mean? And
I'm going to be one of them.
That goes, so I think that's an interesting thing in terms of perception, but also in terms of where people are living, how people are living. Do enjoy living in Brooklyn. I do enjoy my time in the park. I do, and I don't even, the commute to Boston just is in a...
Well, you're on the Amtrak. You're on the Northeastern Corridor.
Yep. And I get a lot done on a train, and so
it's like 3.5 hours. It's no big deal.
Right. And if you buy it all in advance, it's pretty cheap. What does it mean to survive now? What does it mean to thrive now? What does it mean
money-wise or what?
Yeah. I mean, that's in New York or that's anywhere, but what does it mean to survive? What does it mean to thrive? And what does it mean to soar? Most professionals, you're probably going to be a little all over the place because you're going to have multiple revenue streams, whether that's passive income streams from shit that I did, You can
swear.
I can swear. From stuff that I did.
That I fucking say whatever the fuck you want.
Right, that's true.
So basically an essential thing to anybody who wants to move to New York City, Manhattan, be successful in any kind of the arts that are in this specific region, you should already have some things in place. Now, for me in my path, it meant, flipping way back to Dallas. I mean, I was part of a scene in Dallas that included, that was everything from Edie Brickell and New Bohemians. Right. And a really great club called the Theater Gallery, which has just got a documentary coming out about it. And this was DIY, independent music, kind of punk rock. We called it underground music at the time, and that's really what I was coming out of from 84 all the way through 90, and then I left Dallas in 97, but I'd already kind of had a planned exit strategy by 95. But the point being is in the early 90s I was doing music for dance. I sang in a church job. I was a baritone soloist in a church job. I played bass in 2 symphonies. I had a full rock band that played at gigs once a month. I had coffee shop gigs once a week. Wow. I taught about 20 students, and that was my life. This is like different than a regular. I mean, when because I've been in Texas. I love me some Texas. Yeah. But it's pretty slower pace, I would think, at that time. There's some day-to-day stuff that's not entirely different. So I've been doing what I've always been doing, and I don't see that mode shifting, that multimodal thing. I've probably mentioned this before, but like
That's why I love collaborating. I also love being a bass player, supportive person. I find it to lead everything all the time. I find exhausting, and I don't like it. So I actually like to just be a supportive.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
I feel it's I love being a part of a team, and some of that's in a musical sense, and some of that's in a film or creative sense. And I mean, that was even from just playing bass in an orchestra. Like the fact that you have 6 people playing one part, that there's a viscerality to what it takes to move that much air that I'd really enjoy.
You ever in like rock bands though? Do you ever go traditional rock bands?
Oh yeah. No, I played...
younger in Dallas?
I played at CBGB's.
What band? You played at CBGB's?
Many times, yeah. I played it.
What band did you play with there?
I played with a prog rock situation called with a songwriter named Miles Green. I've been trying to look him up, but the point, what I was going to say is, moved to New York June 1st, 1997. Played Carnegie Hall and CBGB's within 4 months, within a week of each other in 97. I've helped out with films with music supervision, music editing, post-production supervision. These are all things that I do. Yeah. And I'm also a pretty good script reader and give notes on things like that. So there's some films where I've gotten to do that. And hey, have you thought about, how we're going to bring music supervision related decisions of how we're going to tell this story, how we're going to shoot this film, set location, tone, et cetera, by bringing in the right kinds of songs and artists. So there's a big artist I'm going over after right now for a particular film for next year. And so if I pull that off, that will mean that not only will this film have that song in the soundtrack, but there will also be elements of that song in the score. Not entirely dissimilar from the way that Gioacchino brought in a particular Radiohead song for The Batman. So that was...
Oh, right.
That might be kind of a method of working. So
of all the people I know, to keep all of this sort of energy going as you do with all of these different projects that you're involved in, there has to be some kind of thing on the other side for body and mind. I mean, do you have some insight into that?
Well, it's been progressing. I move. I mean, when you and I have kind of riffed on sometimes I really changed where people that would characterize some of what my health approach is revolved around exercise. I've really morphed it now. I think it's just about moving and breathing, and that involves.
So not like weights and stuff. Like you're not trying to be all.
Oh no,
you're not going ripped here.
Yeah, this Texan has a wetsuit. I have swum more in Rhode Island.
Yeah, you've been swimming in Rhode Island, right? Maybe I'll go swimming with you. I'll go with you.
I swam I biked out to Rockaway a couple.
Yeah, you're always biking, right?
I biked to Rockaway and then swam in the ocean, and I love it. And so there's the daily practice of it in terms of breath, and there's the daily practice of it in terms of moving.
What do you mean, like yoga?
There's just breathing exercises that I do.
Like what? Like how's that all work out?
There's the 4-7-8
what is
breathing.
That?
That's some Tim Harris stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I've been checking out. But I'll circle back to the actual. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. I mean, I have a lot of things I want to do, and I will probably never be able to do.
You didn't think you did enough, Chris?
I will probably never be able to do all the things I want to do. And yet living longer will make some of that possible, as well as change the frame for success and failure. I think one of the things I like about the notion of having the intent to live longer means that this search for I have more chances to get more things right now.
To get things right because you think you got things wrong?
No, it's just more to do more work to get things as close to as intended as possible. And
intended?
To be the best version.
These are odd words you're using. This is like, so there's a fate sort of thing going on? Or?
No. It's really I have a lot of things I want to do, And so that's the part of it.
And you don't think you've done them in this storied career?
Oh, no. There's a lot of things that have been exactly as they were supposed to happen.
Right.
Of course. But I have to keep trying. That's the whole...
But what more would you want more than you've achieved already?
Oh, I mean, there's parts
of
me
other than career opportunities.
There's creative things to say. There's more songs. What? There's more symphonies. There's more scores. There's more participating in different kinds of storytelling with me as a filmmaker, with me as a writer, with other even just on a daily practice of jamming more, which kind of relates to this multi.
That's kind of where I wanted to go with you.
The multi-instrumental thing of just like what would it mean to every day be able to just spontaneously do a 1-minute improv that really expresses what's going on where I am that day. It's daily. I mean, I have more instruments out now than I've had in several years.
But are you making anything? Like what's
all
happening?
the time? How much can I put down on a piece of paper that shows my intent, and yet knowing that as a conductor I can still meld that in the moment. And that moment to me is a form of sound and storytelling that exists in film. So those are the ways that I feel most alive and I feel most engaged. And so there's singles, there's songs, there's albums. I've got a long delayed double album called Spacebar that is
Spacebar. I love
that. And yet I've realized now is it may be a multi-volume thing, which is to say,
like volume one. Yeah, don't go too crazy. Just maybe keep it.
It's literally going to be like something I'm just going to keep on working on. In other words,
put out like 8 songs.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So you want to put out a record?
You
want to cut a record, your own record,
several records,
solo.
But yes.
We'll start with the first.
Yeah, exactly, which is Spacebar Volume 1. So that's
Spacebar Volume 1, original music.
Yeah, songs.
Will they be like in what format? Like would it be rock and roll format?
No,
would it be like
songs,
a jazz thing or?
It's really some of the sound. It really there's some of the sounds that are associated with rock, but alternative rock, indie folk. Alternative rock, somewhere between.
I was looking for
somewhere
genres,
between
right.
Gillian Welch and Bjork and Radiohead and these are what I'm kind of focusing on today.
Like there's no one telling you what you can do, so the blank canvas is the scariest.
Yeah. I mean, and I definitely have met other film composers that have that challenge of not releasing solo music anymore.
Right.
And I think in terms of output, that's where I've been really since not putting out a soundtrack or my own record since like 2018.
Yeah.
So that has to be what the next chapter is. And even with the breathing and the swimming and some other stuff
that's what it sounds like it's intended for.
Yeah, right. That I've been building some things for my life, building my life from the ground up.
Well, thanks, Chris, for coming in. I appreciate that. That's really great. Thanks for coming in for one of my last interviews here in Brooklyn.
And
New York,
and then there will be
Borghese Studios.
There will be more of us and more of us in another state.
We'll have to do this interview in Providence. But ladies and gentlemen, Christopher North, everybody, thanks for coming in today. I appreciate it.
That was great, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, take it easy.